Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here, coming at you with another video, and today we're going to be talking about Ni No Kuni 2 for the PlayStation 4. This title was sent to me by Bandai Namco so that I could give it a look and tell you guys my opinions on it. And I gotta tell you, this title most definitely got its hooks in me in ways that I wasn't really expecting, because I played the original Ni No Kuni and I liked it quite a bit. I acknowledge that it was a really good game, but for some reason I was never able to quite get into it as much as I was able to get into Ni No Kuni 2. And I don't know why. I played quite a bit of it, and then I just left it to the wayside and never picked it back up again. But Ni No Kuni 2, ever since I saw it last year at Gamescom and I actually got to play it, I was really surprised by the gameplay, the visuals, the story that they were going for, and it just looked like something that was going to be really fun. So therefore, as soon as I received this particular Ni No Kuni, I instantly delved into it, and I gotta be honest, I wish I had played even more than what I've played of this game so far, but I was only able to put in 10 hours up until this point, and that's because I've been working on all these other videos and live streams and all these things. My attention is being pulled on 100 different directions, but I gotta say, Ni No Kuni has been like that game that I just turn on whenever I got some free time and I just want to chill and enjoy a good story, enjoy the beautiful visuals and the gameplay mechanics that this provides, and I just kind of let myself be immersed into that world. And it's just a complete escape because it is so different from pretty much all of the other games that you have out there. It is a really original feat that I wasn't expecting. And I know you guys are saying an original feat. Come on, it's a sequel to a video game, but it's such a departure from the original that you guys will realize if you actually play this game how much of a departure it is. Now, when I say that this is a very refreshing experience, what I mean by that is that nowadays, it seems that every game is like dark and gloomy and talking about the end of the world. And it's actually interesting to see a game that is just about the story of this prince who became king, and then he suffered this massive tragedy and he lost his kingdom, and he still decided that, no, I'm going to build a new kingdom where everyone is going to live happily ever after. And just that whole concept of both optimism and positivity and just like this character that just wants to do the right thing is just something that you actually don't see in video games anymore, which is surprising, or at least not in the video games that I tend to play. Maybe that actually says a whole lot about me, but whatever. Anyways, getting back to this. Now, I know that the first thing that a lot of people are going to say when they look at this game, they're going to look at the visuals and they'll say, oh my God, it's one of those kids games. This looks like completely something for like 12-year-olds or whatever. And I've always said you should never judge a game's visuals that way, because you're going to end up missing out on a lot of really cool adventures. An example is another game that you've seen recently in the channel, in the form of Moss, which I also thought was really cool, and because of the art style and the way the visuals looked. And I also think that a lot of people are going to label that as a kid's game. And again, don't do that. Just like straight up, don't do that. Judge a game by its merits, by its gameplay, by how much fun it is, and not necessarily how it kind of looks like it's appropriate for a younger audience. The fact that it looks appropriate for a younger audience just means that it is also appropriate for that younger audience as well as a more adult audience. Like, your age is completely irrelevant as far as I'm concerned to whether or not you're going to be able to enjoy the story of this particular game, okay? So just wanted to spell that off the bat. Another thing that I wanted to spell is that a lot of people are going to be wondering, so do I need to have played the original Ni No Kuni in order to understand the story behind Ni No Kuni 2? Is that something that is necessary? The answer to that is no, you do not. While there are some nods to the original that a lot of players will recognize, as a matter of fact, there's even a section, a little puzzle section that talks about some events that took place in the original Ni No Kuni. You don't need to know the story of the original to enjoy this one. I say that as someone who doesn't know the story of Ni No Kuni, and I've been completely engrossed by the story of Ni No Kuni 2, okay? So first of all, let's talk about the visuals. I already went a little bit in detail with that about how they look, that it's for a younger audience, but in my opinion, that's not the only thing you should judge them for. But if you look at these visuals, these are gorgeous looking visuals. From both a graphical fidelity standpoint, this game can actually do 4K with HDR, and it looks beautiful, but it also looks really good in just standard 1080p, which is fine. It runs at 60 FPS, at least on the PS4 Pro. I'm not sure if it also runs 60 on the regular PS4. That's probably something I should have checked up on, but I didn't. Anyway, It runs at 60 FPS on PS4 Pro, pretty much constant. Every now and then I've seen a dip, particularly when I'm going over the overworld map or in some dungeons where a lot of stuff is happening. I see a dip here and there, but most of the time it is running 60 FPS. It looks good. It animates even better. The animations on this game are phenomenal, whether it is in the cutscenes themselves or in the gameplay while you are exploring a dungeon, or if you're in the overworld map, like everything just plays like I would expect, and everything looks beautiful and gorgeous. I really don't have anything negative to point out on the visual side of things. When it comes to the soundtrack, I thought the soundtrack was pretty epic. It was pretty nice. It actually got me engrossed. Like from the moment you actually get to the main menu and you hear the da-da-da, da-da-da, it just really gets you into the mood for what this game is all about. So far, it has been very satisfying. Although, I do have to say, a lot of the times it does get repetitive. Like, say, for instance, you're going through the overworld map, and you go to a fight, and it's the same music. And then you go to another fight, and it's the same music. So that does get a little bit repetitive. But the music is good, so there is that. From a sound perspective as well, all the sound effects seem to be on point. The voice acting in the game is actually really good as well. From pretty much every scene that I've seen so far, I like it. However, not the whole game is voice acted, which is actually something that for some reason I was expecting. I was expecting most of the game to be voice acted, but in reality it's the other way around. A lot of the game is actually text. You're reading a lot of text throughout the adventure. There are certain scenes which will be voice acted, like main cutscenes, and like major story beats will be fully voice acted, but a lot of the game will be you actually reading text. But now let's talk about the actual gameplay loop. So naturally, there's an intro to the game, which is going to be a little bit scripted, where you're going to be learning the basics of combat and so on and so forth. But I'm going to be stepping beyond the introductory, let's call it even the prologue of the game. And I'm going to be stepping a little bit forward. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to be telling you guys any spoilers whatsoever of the story, and none of the footage that you will watch here can be considered spoiler. I mean, sure, I'll be showing some dungeon crawling, but it's going to be mostly of side quests, and I will show you a little bit of the overworld map and how your kingdom is going to look a little bit just in the early stages, but none of it is going to be spoilery, okay? But anyway, moving past the prologue, and once they actually start introducing a lot of the mechanics to you, what is your gameplay going to be looking like? Well, for starters, you're going to have quests that are going to be about the main story campaign, which will involve you going to places and sometimes solving puzzles, other times performing certain tasks, just like you would expect from your typical RPG experience. This is kind of like a JRPG, and I hesitate to say JRPG because while it has a lot of mechanics that will be familiar to the JRPG fans, nowadays we associate the term JRPG to heavy grind game where you will grind to gain levels and all these other things. And I kind of don't feel like you have to grind in Ni No Kuni 2 at all. I mean, you can if you want to, but that is going to be completely optional. So far, most of the stuff that I've done has actually felt pretty easy. But as I was saying, so the gameplay, you have your main story campaign, which you can go and do at your own pace. You will have certain quests, which will involve like dungeon crawling. And when I say dungeon crawling, it's not always dungeons. Like sometimes you will be, like say, in a canyon, and you will be exploring it and looking for the secret nooks and crannies. There's always places that you can go to and explore and find new treasures and things. There's also side quests, which are a little bit more simple, but they still each have like story as well as reasons for you to do those particular side quests. And then there is a kingdom building kind of aspect to it. And some people are going to be a little bit confused by that. Some people are going to be like, oh, but what's that kingdom building like? Is that like fun mechanics? Is that like boring stuff that you have to do? For starters, most of it actually feels rather optional. I've never really been forced to like, oh, you got to develop your kingdom and do this. I've mostly been doing it because I kind of like those systems in a lot of video games. So building up your kingdom consists of you deciding, okay, I want to build these specific buildings, and then I want to assign these people to these buildings. And depending on the the citizens that you assign to each of the buildings that you have in your kingdom, you can then develop certain upgrades which will help you out in the main game. So there is a reason for you to go through all this stuff. You will get some benefits to it. You will get maybe some special party members, which are the Higgledies. I forget their actual name. They're these little sprite-looking spirits that will help you in combat. And for instance, one of the buildings is about upgrading them and leveling them up so that they can become stronger. So that's one of them. The other one will be about leveling up your spells so that you can make your spells stronger. The other one's about crafting gear or finding food or finding consumables. And just like there's a lot of things when it comes to building your kingdom, but you only have to invest yourself as much as you want in that aspect of the game. I just personally have a lot of fun with that. So as you are then going throughout your quests into the world and whatnot, you might find side quests, and sometimes those side quests will involve characters that if you complete the side quest that character asks of you, and there's always story associated with it. There's never like, oh yeah, just go here, kill 10 boars, whatever. There's usually a backstory as to why they're asking you to do those things. And if you complete their side quest, they will join your kingdom, and therefore your kingdom kind of becomes stronger because you have a new citizen that you can assign. Usually each citizen has like a special skill that he is going to excel at, and that is going to determine which building you're going to place him in. But anyway, as you are experiencing these adventures throughout the world, like I said, the main character is super positive. So far, the story, I've really enjoyed it. It is somewhat simplistic up until the point where I've played, but it's still, again, it is refreshing because of the fact that it is the type of story that is not told as much anymore, because everybody is telling these dark and gloomy stories, you know? But as you go through all these things, there's naturally going to be a combat aspect to the game. Now, in the original Ni No Kuni, combat was done by turn-based. So you would go around and you would then select each action for each turn. And this time they decided to go real-time. So what this combat reminds me of is actually the Tales of series. If you guys ever played like Tales of Berseria, I made a video on that, I think last year at some point. And that's kind of like what this combat reminds me of. So basically you pick a character, you can play any of the characters that is available to you. So you can alternate between them in the middle of combat if you want to. Mostly I tend to play as the main character most of the time, which is why most of the footage that you guys will see is me playing as that character. And during combat, you can do special stuff like spells and special attacks, and you have to power up your attacks with mana. You can get mana by just doing basic attacks on monsters. You also have range attacks and dodges, and it is actually a really well-accomplished combat system, in my opinion, which is why I think I got so engrossed by it, because I really like the complexity and the depth that there is to it. Unfortunately, there is a bit of a downside when it comes to the combat, which is it feels too easy. Now, in a way, that is good because it does allow that younger audience to really enjoy the title. But in another way, it's like once you really come to grips with the combat encounters, a lot of the times you'll just go into an encounter, perform your special, and damn near destroy everything. Now, having said that, the game then provides you with these interesting challenges in the form of tainted monsters. And those are the things that I actually like, because tainted monsters actually require you to min-max your party up and go up against them and actually perform properly, actually dodge the oncoming attacks of your enemies. Whereas the more regular combat encounters, you can kind of just blow through them. These tainted encounters, like, they will actually kill some of your team members. Like, they will actually kill you if you are not paying attention. And those feel very, very satisfying. As a matter of fact, there's an interesting aspect of the game that I was very confused the first time I came across it, which was the tweaker, the battle tweaker, or the combat tweaker, whatever they call it. And essentially what that does is it's this menu that allows you to kind of specialize your party in different ways, where you can decide, okay, I want my party to be able to like block better, or I want my party to be able to attack from a range better, or I want my party to be able to do heavy attacks better. And I thought that was kind of weird because, like, well, I want my party to be, you know, well-rounded. And then there's specific things that you can get into. Like, you can say, okay, I want my party to be more resilient against fire. The drawback is that you're going to be, like, weaker against water or something. And I thought that that was going to be something that I was like, dude, I'm always going to keep my party on neutral, right? But then when I started going up against tainted monsters, I was like, no, now this thing makes sense, because tainted monsters are an actual challenge. So you can actually put points into this tweaker thing, and then you can be like, okay, I can see that the enemy that I'm about to fight, because the tainted monsters are just like bosses that are there. They won't actually aggro you. You have to go up to them and say, okay, I want to fight this boss. So you can kind of like identify the type of enemy that you're going to be fighting. And so you can say like, I want my party to be stronger against these slimy looking enemies. And I want my party to be have heavy defense against fire. And you will be good for fighting like a fire elemental, right? You're going to have some advantage with that stuff. And that is an interesting aspect of the game that I really started getting into. So the tainted monsters right now is what interests me the most. That and bosses of dungeons, those are usually going to provide me with a little bit more challenging. But most of the other combat, I just kind of go in there and I just like smash everything up, kill everything. Which is why I'm personally also avoiding grinding as much as I can, because so far the game has felt quite a bit easy, and that is my main complaint about Ni No Kuni 2. As a matter of fact, I was doing a Google search seeing if maybe there was like a New Game Plus mode or something, or maybe an increased difficulty mode, and that has not really been a thing that I've personally found so far. And that would be, again, my main criticism, the main thing that I would have to point to the developers and be like, look, I want to be a little bit more, I want the game to be a little bit more challenging. You know, I want to actually be challenged more than what is happening here. I mean, apart from tainted monsters and like bosses, everything else is pretty much a cakewalk. It's just like you go through it. You're not even thinking. You can just spam square and kill everything. A lot of times your party alone can almost kill stuff for you if you want to. But having said that, it's not really something that has been keeping me like, oh my god, I really don't enjoy the game because it's so easy. It's more like, well, let's just keep progressing through the story so that I can experience more of the story and fight harder enemies, which then happens through side quests and stuff like that. So that I've been enjoying quite a bit. Now, beyond that, there's also another interesting thing, which are skirmishes. And skirmishes is essentially these also... While you do one that is part of the main story quest, I'm not sure if they're going to be required of me to do throughout the game, because so far they just kind of have shown up as optional things that you do. But the skirmishes is like an interesting game mode where you're kind of like controlling a small army, and you decide in which ways you angle them in order to decide if your front is going to be made of... Right now I only have swordsmen and archers. So basically you decide where you want your archer's position and where you want your swordsman's position. Pretty much I just put the swordsman in front, and then you kind of like yell orders at them. Like you can make them run faster, you can make them perform special abilities. It's a small little more strategy emphasis activity that you do, and you gain rewards for doing it. And that particular activity actually has an increased difficulty mode if you want to challenge yourself a little bit further, which I was surprised. I'm like, why can't you make the combat harder instead of this? But okay. But yeah, those skirmishes are also cool. There was the first one that you do is actually pretty cool, because you're fighting an actual army from with an enemy, and the enemy is constantly like taunting you, like, "Oh, I'm gonna beat you," and whatnot. And I thought that was interesting. But ultimately, the skirmishes, I got to be honest, I haven't explored all that much of them. Now, when it comes to the actual combat, whenever you enter combat, you also have like this circle that shows up. So you're going to be actually locked into combat whenever you do. It's not like other games where, like, say you'd be running in a dungeon and then you see a monster and you touch the monster and then everybody just kind of like teleports to a location. That happens in the overworld map, but it's usually pretty seamless. The loads are not super long, so you're not constantly being taken out of the experience. Everything just kind of flows nicely, so that's pretty cool. The other thing, speaking about flow, is that pretty much at the start of the game you unlock a quick travel system. So there's never really a situation where like, oh my god, now I have to go through the overworld map and go through all of those enemies again. Oh my god. That doesn't happen, like, because you're constantly unlocking new locations that you can travel to. So you're always fast traveling somewhere if you want to just keep things moving along. You can also just explore the overworld map if that's what you want to do. But if you want to focus on the main story, you can kind of just constantly jump into each of the main story quests and just keep progressing that way. It's completely up to you. There's no fee or anything that you have to pay through the ease of travel. It's just like you just travel to wherever you want and you're pretty much good to go. Then there's also these puzzle sections. Like I came up on one very early on, which was like a test of knowledge or whatever. And it's a very interesting puzzle where you actually have to go and do these things in a very specific order, and you can't go back because the ground falls behind you. So it's a very specific type of puzzle that I'm not sure that everybody's going to enjoy that. But I thought it was interesting because again, it was a logic puzzle. So it's like, here's this story, and then you have to go to these statues in order. You have to make sure the statues are facing the right place. And if you want, you have to make sure that you also pick up all of the bonus things in the area. So those puzzles were interesting, but again, that is one of the things that I'm not sure that everybody is going to enjoy. But overall, I have to say, I really like the whole package, like the whole experience of the game. Like I said, my only criticism of it is how easy the combat feels at this point. Maybe I'm just like, well, you're only 10 hours in, you know, maybe 15 hours in, you'll be saying, holy crap, I cannot progress through the game. That might be a thing. I don't know. But at this point in time, the combat still feels mostly easy. But again, the tented enemies provide me with a bit of a challenge whenever I feel like, okay, I want to actually go and fight something above my level and see how I can do. And that is, again, it balances it out. Because like, even if you're the kind of player that wants the whole challenging experience, you can still get that through the tainted mobs. So it's not really much of a problem. But yeah, like I said, the story so far has been pretty cool. All the mechanics, I'm really enjoying them. The visuals are beautiful. The sound is cool. The story, I'm liking it. So yeah, should you play Ni No Kuni 2? In my opinion, if you like the gameplay that you've watched in this video, most definitely. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
I have you now.